I was standing on my mother's back porch, with a pan of cornbread, when I heard her say my name. The kitchen window was cracked 2 inches, the kind of crack you leave in October, when the heat's been on all day, and you want the room to breathe. Her voice came through it the way sound comes through a small opening, clear and close and completely unaware it had an audience. She was talking to my brother. She said, "Don't panic, Marcus, we'll get Della to handle it. She's got the money and you know she won't say no." I stood on that porch for I don't know how long. The cornbread was still warm in my hands. What I did in the 9 days after that evening, and what happened when my mother knocked on my door the following Saturday, with her good coat on and everyone else behind her, is the thing I have been turning over in my hands ever since. I want to tell you all of it, every piece, because this is not just a story about $48,000. This is a story about what happens when the person who has been quietly holding everything together finally sets it down. Welcome back to Sweet Payback Stories. If you've ever been the one everyone depended on, but nobody appreciated, this story is for you. Subscribe and stay until the end, because sometimes the truth is hiding in the numbers. My name is Della Faye Morton. I am 35 years old. I work as a grant accountant for a non-profit housing organization in Clarksville, Tennessee, which means I spend my days making sure that federal dollars go exactly where they are supposed to go and can be documented to the cent when auditors come calling. I am precise. I have always been precise. I think it is probably the most honest thing I can say about myself, that when everyone else in a room is looking at the general shape of something, I am looking at the exact number underneath it. My mother, Patricia Morton, is 62. She has a gift for managing people, not cruelly, not deliberately, but with the specific warmth of a woman who learned early that if you make someone feel loved enough, they will do almost anything you need them to do without you ever having to ask outright. She raised 3 children, my older brother Marcus, who is 39, me, and my younger sister Tanya, who is 28 and lives in Atlanta and has learned, more effectively than I ever did, to put distance between herself and situations like this one. Marcus is the reason we are all here tonight. Marcus is 39 and talented in the way that certain people are talented, visibly, convincingly, in a way that makes everyone around them believe the next thing is going to be the one that works. He had a car detailing business that did well for 2 years and then didn't. He had a vending machine route that made sense on paper and lost money in practice. He had a construction supply company that he started with a partner he trusted and who turned out not to deserve it. Every time one of these things ended, my mother found a way to keep it from being as bad as it was. Alone here, a conversation there, the family closing ranks the way my mother always described it, a phrase I had heard my entire adult life and which I had come to understand meant, we will find a way to make this right, and the we in that sentence had always been me. My father, Earl, passed 6 years ago. Heart disease, the way the men in our family tend to go. What he left behind was a small life insurance policy, a paid-off car, and a house in Clarksville that my mother owns free and clear, which is the only reason the math of this family has functioned as long as it has. And me. He left behind me, not as an asset, I want to be clear about that, because my father was a gentleman who saw me clearly, but the function I had served in the family structure became more necessary after he was gone, because the person who had quietly been the second set of hands in the room was no longer there, and the person who stepped into that vacancy without anyone appointing her was the person who had always handled things, me. I learned to keep records at 22, when I started helping my mother with the household paperwork after Dad got sick. Insurance forms, medical billing disputes, the mortgage refinance that saved them $300 a month, all of it passed through my hands. I had been in my first accounting job for 8 months. I brought home the forms in a folder and stayed up 2 nights learning what I needed to learn. Nobody ever said thank you. Not because they were unkind, because they had decided that this was simply the thing I did, the way some people take out the trash. I got my CPA. I got a job I was good at. I married a man named Reginald, who is a high school science teacher, and who approaches the world with the specific patience of a man who has spent 15 years explaining things to teenagers, and has made his peace with the fact that most things take longer to understand than they should. Reginald and I do not have a lavish life. We have a careful one. 2 years ago, we started saving towards something we had been circling for a long time, a house of our own. We had been renting a 2-bedroom on the east side of Clarksville for 4 years, and the landlord had started mentioning selling, and we wanted to be ready when the right thing came up. $43,000. That was what we had in the account I kept at a credit union 3 miles from our apartment. 4 years of packed lunches and held vacations, and the specific discipline of people who know what they are working toward and are willing to wait for it. My mother knew about the account. Not the exact number. I had stopped sharing exact numbers with my mother some years back, for reasons I had not fully examined until the night of the cornbread, but she knew the account existed. She knew it was substantial. She knew, the way mothers know things without being told directly, that her daughter was the person in the family with the most dependable cushion. Marcus's most recent situation was a debt of $48,000. The construction supply partnership had dissolved acrimoniously 18 months ago. His former partner had sued and the suit had settled, but the settlement had wiped out whatever cash Marcus had and left him still owing on a personal loan he had taken out to fund the initial inventory. The loan servicer had been patient for a year. They had stopped being patient in September. I knew some of this, not the full amount. The way I usually knew about Marcus's situations, in fragments, passed through my mother's translations, always smaller and more resolved sounding than they actually were. What I did not know, until the window was cracked 2 inches on a Wednesday evening in October, was that a decision had already been made. We'll get Della to handle it. She's got the money and you know she won't say no. There was more after that. My brother saying something I couldn't make out. Then my mother's voice again, lower, the reassuring tone she used when she needed someone to stop panicking and let her steer. She's never let this family down. She's not going to start now. I stood on that porch for a long time. The cornbread was in a 9x13 pan that Reginald's mother had given us for a wedding gift, a heavy cast aluminum thing that held its heat. The heat from it came through the dish towel I'd wrapped around it to carry it. I set it down on the porch railing very carefully. Then I walked back to my car. I drove the 18 minutes home, with both hands on the wheel, and my mind doing what my mind does when it needs to think clearly. I started counting. I counted what I knew. I counted what I didn't know but could find out. I counted the distance between what my mother believed was going to happen and what I now understood was actually going to happen. By the time I pulled into our parking lot, I had the beginning of a plan. I did not tell Reginald immediately. I sat in the car for 4 minutes. I needed to be sure of what I had heard before I said it out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real, and real would require action, and I wanted the action to be right. Then I went inside. He was at the kitchen table grading lab reports. He looked up when I came in without the cornbread, and without my usual after-visit energy. He took off his reading glasses. Tell me, he said. So I told him. Reginald listened the way he listens to everything, fully, without interrupting, in the posture of a man who has decided that the most useful thing he can do right now is be a clear container for information. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, how much do they think is in that account? I said, I don't know exactly what she knows. He said, does she have access to any of it? I went still, because here is the thing I had not thought about yet, the thing that needed thinking about immediately. 3 years ago, when my mother had a small health scare, nothing serious, a fall that required a brief hospitalization, I had added myself to her checking account so I could pay her bills while she recovered. Standard, practical, the kind of thing you do because you are the person who handles things. What I had not thought about, in the 4 years since, was the reverse arrangement. My mother had never been added to any of my accounts, but the account I had opened at the credit union, the one where the $43,000 sat, had been opened with a referral from my mother, who banked at the same credit union. We were linked in the system as related accounts. I did not know exactly what that meant in terms of access. I said, I need to call the credit union in the morning. Reginald nodded. Tonight, he said, I want you to check the account online and make sure nothing has moved. I opened my laptop. The balance was unchanged. The account was untouched. I sat back. Reginald said, here is what I think. The exposure is the account. As long as the money is sitting where it has always been, where she knows it sits, it is a target. I want you to think about moving it. He said it exactly like that. Not we should move it, or let me move it. He said I want you to think about moving it, because Reginald has a very clear sense of whose money this was and who should make the decision about it. Where? I said, an account she doesn't know exists. A different bank. Tonight if you can, tomorrow at the latest, I looked at him. He said, I know it sounds dramatic. I said, it doesn't sound dramatic at all. And it didn't, because I had been a grant accountant for 9 years, and I had watched what happened to money that wasn't protected before the question was asked. The question in this case was coming. It was coming on Saturday, with my mother's good coat, and everyone behind her. And the gap between now and Saturday was the only window I had. I opened a new tab. I researched banks within 10 miles of our apartment where neither my mother nor Marcus had ever done business. I found one, a regional bank with a branch on the north side that neither of them had reason to ever visit. The online account opening took 22 minutes. I opened a high-yield savings account in my name only. I transferred the first portion of our house fund that night. I set up the transfer to complete by morning. Then I closed the laptop. Reginald had made tea while I worked. He set a mug at my elbow without a word. I said, she's going to call. He said, yes. I said, she's going to be sweet about it. He said, yes. I said, and when the sweet doesn't work, she's going to bring my father into it. He looked at me, probably. I picked up the mug. I said, I need 9 days. He said, for what? I said, to build the record. Before any of them walk into this house, I want the full picture on paper. Every dollar I have ever put into this family. Every time the money went out and never came back. I want to know the exact number before anyone asks me for another one. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing that told me, not for the first time, exactly why I married him. That sounds like the right way to do this. Not, I'll help you. Not, let me handle it. Just a confirmation that the approach was correct from a man who understood the difference between support and rescue. I went to bed. I didn't sleep well, but I went to bed. In the morning, I called the credit union. The representative I reached was helpful and thorough. I asked about the related accounts designation and whether it conferred any access between the accounts. She said, related accounts are a customer service grouping for our records. They do not grant access between account holders. I said, does my mother bank there? She said, I can't share information about other customers' accounts. I said, I understand. I'm asking whether someone could come into a branch and represent themselves as a family member and access my account. She explained the policies clearly. No unauthorized access. No exceptions for family relationships. My account was mine. I thanked her. I sat at my kitchen table with my second coffee and I let the relief arrive. Then I picked up my notebook and I started the list. Not the emotional list, not the hurt list, the accounting list, the one with columns, date, amount, purpose, repaid. I started in 2015 and I worked forward. The first call came Thursday morning. I was at my desk at work when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Patricia Morton calling at 9:17 on a Thursday. This was unusual. My mother and I talked on Sundays and in emergencies. Thursday morning meant she had decided this was an emergency and had not wanted to wait. I let it ring through and go to voicemail. I was not ready yet. She left a message. Her voice was warm, the specific warmth of my mother on the approach, like the air before a front moves in, gentle and weighted at the same time. Della, honey, call me when you get a chance. Nothing urgent, just wanted to catch up. Things have been a little stressful around here lately with Marcus's situation. You know how it is. Talk soon, love. Nothing urgent. I saved the voicemail. I opened a folder on my phone and labeled it October and put it in there because I am a grant accountant and I know that documentation begins on the first day, not the day you think you might need it. That evening, I started the accounting. I went back to my bank records as far as the online history would allow. 7 years of transactions. For anything older, I had paper records because I do not throw away financial documents. It is one of my professional habits that has bled into my personal life without apology. I started the column. 2015, $1,800 to Marcus for a lease deposit when the detailing business got its first location. Money I transferred on a Sunday because my mother called on a Saturday and said it was urgent and he just needed to get over the hump. Repaid, $0. 2016, $2,400 in 4 payments to cover my mother's property taxes when the escrow account was mismanaged by the servicer and the bill came due in a lump. I had handled the dispute with the servicer. I had also paid the tax bill while the dispute was ongoing because the county would not wait for a mortgage company argument to resolve. repaid, $0. 2017, $3,500 to Marcus for inventory on the vending machine route. He was going to pay me back at 20% of the monthly profit until it was cleared. There had been no profit. Repaid, $0. 2018, $900 to my mother for a car repair. This one I did not begrudge. Her car, a brake job. She was going to lose her job if she could not get to work. But the column required honesty, so I wrote it down. Repaid, $0. I kept going. 2019, 2020, 2021. Every time I thought I remembered all of them, I would find one more in the records that I had forgotten about. A Christmas I had quietly supplemented because things were tight. A medical copay for Marcus that I had fronted because the appointment couldn't be delayed and he said he'd pay me back at the end of the month. End of the month had come. Repaid, $0. By the time I finished, the column was 11 items long. The total, when I added it, $29,400. I wrote the number in the center of a clean page. Underlined it once. $29,400. Not a windfall. Not an inheritance. Not money that had fallen out of the sky. $29,400 of my own income. Money I had earned at my desk, filing grant reports and reconciling federal allocations, and staying late when the auditors came, because that is the job. And in the column to the right of every single entry, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, $0, 11 zeros, 1 per transaction. Not $1 had ever come back. I had not done this accounting before. I want to be honest about that. I had not done it because doing it required me to see something I had been choosing not to see, that the exchange was entirely one-directional, that the word help had been operating as a synonym for give in my family for 10 years, and that nobody involved had ever once meant give to be permanent, but nobody had ever once made sure it wasn't. I looked at the number for a long time. Then I opened a new page. What they are asking for now, $48,000. I wrote it under the $29,400. Then I wrote, grand total if I comply, $77,400. Out of a house fund of $43,000. The math didn't even work. They were asking for more than I had. They were asking for more than 10 years of careful saving, plus the decade of help before it, all of it added together. And they had not asked me. They had told my brother, in a kitchen with the window cracked, that I would handle it. The second call came Friday. My mother this time, the warmth still present, but with a new directness underneath it, the current below the surface becoming more visible. She said Marcus was in a difficult spot. She said the collectors were calling the house now. She said as a family we needed to come together. She said, I know you've always been the one we could count on, Della. I said, ham. She said, it might just be the loan, not even the whole thing. We'd figure it out together. I said, I appreciate you calling, Mama. Let me think about it. She said, of course, take your time. She said it warmly, which meant she was giving me until Saturday. After I hung up, I added the call to the October folder. Date, time, summary of content. Then Marcus texted. He didn't start with a greeting. He started with a number. Collectors are calling Sharice's work now. $48,000. I need this done. I saved the text. I noted the timestamp. I added it to the folder. Then I called the bank about something I had been turning over since Wednesday. My mother and I had a joint safety deposit box at a local branch, an artifact from years ago, when she had kept some documents there and needed me to be able to access them. The box contained mostly old papers. I had not opened it in years. I went to the branch on Saturday morning. I opened the box. The papers were old and harmless. Titles, insurance documents, things that predated my financial life. Nothing that touched what we were dealing with. But I closed it. I removed myself from the box. I removed myself from any account designation or notification arrangement I could locate that connected my mother to any financial instrument with my name on it. Not because I was taking anything from her, because I was closing every door I had absent-mindedly left open, the ones I had not thought about, because I had never needed to think about them, because in 10 years, the money had always flowed in only one direction, outward, from me. I came home and sat at the kitchen table with my list and I thought about who I had been in this family and who I was going to be now. And I thought about the cornbread still sitting on my mother's porch railing. I had not gone back for it. Nobody had called to ask why I had left it. Cherise was Marcus's girlfriend. She was 34, worked at a call center, had 2 kids from a previous relationship that Marcus helped raise without ever formalizing anything. She was not unkind as a person. She was, however, the person who texted me on Tuesday morning with the message I read 3 times before I knew what to do with it. I know you and Marcus have your differences, but those kids need their dad stable. If you can help and you don't, that's something you're going to carry. I read it 3 times. The cruelty of it was not in the content exactly. The cruelty was in the confidence of it, the certainty that I was the one who needed to be called to account, that my potential refusal was the threat to the children and not the decade of financial decisions that had created the $48,000 hole. I saved the screenshot, labeled it, added it to the October folder. Did not reply. My father's name came into it on Wednesday, the way it always did when the softer tools stopped moving me. My mother called in the evening. She started with the weather. Then she said she'd been thinking about Earl. Said he always believed family was the only net you had. Said he used to say if you have your family you have everything. My father did say that. He said it often. He meant it in the way that generous people mean generous things, not as a contract, not as a tool, just as his true belief about the world. He meant it looking at a full table on Sunday. He did not mean it as justification for extracting $48,000 from the account his daughter had saved over 4 years. I let my mother say the things she needed to say. I said, I know, Mama. I said, I miss him too. I said, let me think about everything. I hung up. I added the call to the folder. Then I went to the kitchen table and I sat across from Reginald, who had been grading at the other end, and I said, she used Dad. He set down his pen. I know. I said, that almost worked. He said, I know that too. I looked at the table for a moment. I said, I need you to be in the room on Saturday. He said, already planned on it. I said, I need you to not speak unless I ask you to. He said, of course. I said, and I need you to witness. If they try to rewrite what happened Saturday, I need someone else who was there. He nodded. I'll be in the room. I spent Wednesday evening and Thursday morning finishing the folder. It had 4 sections. Section 1, the accounting ledger. Every transaction since 2015. 11 entries, dates, amounts, purposes, the repayment column, the total at the bottom. Section 2, the current request, the texts and voicemails, summarized by date, Marcus's text, Cherise's text, my mother's calls, the timeline of how this had been approached. Section 3, the account status, a 1-page summary of the fact that I had moved the house fund to a new account in my name only. Not the new account number, just the fact that it had been done, in plain language, so that there would be no confusion about what I had and had not done. Section 4, what I was and was not willing to discuss. Section 4 was the hardest to write. It took me 2 evenings. I am a precise person, but I am not a cold one, and the distance between what I needed to say and what I wanted to feel while I said it required more drafting than any of the financial pages. What I settled on was this: I was not going to pay Marcus's debt. I was not going to argue about that decision. I was going to present the ledger, let it speak, and then say 1 sentence. The sentence I had been training for without knowing it since I was 22 years old at a kitchen table filing insurance forms. I was going to say, no, not I can't, not maybe later, not let me see what I can do. No. I printed the folder, 4 sections, paper-clipped separately, placed in order in a manila folder. The folder sat on the corner of the kitchen counter from Thursday evening onward. Reginald looked at it once. He said, you're ready. I said, I've been ready for 10 years. I just didn't know it. My mother texted Friday night. We'll all come over Saturday around noon. I'll bring food. We're going to get this figured out as a family. I know you'll do the right thing, Della. You always do. I read it standing at the counter. You always do the right thing. For 35 years, that had been a compliment. I was finally old enough to understand it was also a threat. I wrote back 2 words. See you then. They arrived at 12:04. My mother first, in the wool coat she wore to church, carrying a covered dish, a gesture of normalcy so deliberate it almost made me admire her. Then Marcus, hands in the pockets of his good jeans, jaw set, looking at the sidewalk. Then Cherise, one step behind him, phone already in her hand. And last, my Aunt Beverly, my mother's sister, who I had not been told was coming and whose presence told me everything about how my mother had framed this gathering, as a family intervention, a council, a thing where the weight of numbers was supposed to do the work that argument alone could not. Aunt Beverly had not been told what this meeting was actually about. She had been told her niece needed some family support. I know this because Beverly looked genuinely confused for most of the next 4 to 5 minutes. Reginald opened the door. He was warm and appropriate, took the covered dish, offered water, said nothing about the gathering itself. They arranged themselves in our living room the way my family always arranges, my mother at the center, the others orienting toward her, Marcus and Cherise on the couch, Beverly in the armchair, my mother in the chair nearest the window, the position that faced the most of the room. I stayed standing. I had not planned to stay standing. It happened because when they all sat down, I realized I was still on my feet and the standing felt right, so I kept it. Reginald went to the corner with his water. My mother did not wait long to begin. She is not a woman who delays when the stage is set. She said, Della, I know this is hard. I know it feels like a lot, but this family has been through hard things before and we have always come through together because that is what we do. She paused. She looked at me with the warmth turned all the way up, the warmth she saved for the moments that mattered most. Then she said it, the sentence, the one through the cracked window, and in the Thursday calls, and in 100 variations, over 10 years. You have never let this family down. You are not going to start now. The room held still. Marcus looked at his hands. Cherise looked at me. Beverly looked at my mother with an expression that was beginning to realize this was not the kind of family support she had been expecting. I looked at my mother, and then I reached for the folder. Before we talk about what comes next, I said, I want everyone to see where things actually stand. I opened the first section, and set it on the coffee table, turned so they could all read it. That is a ledger of every dollar I have put into this family since 2015. Dates, amounts, purposes, and the column on the right is how much has been repaid. I let them look at it. My mother's eyes moved down the page. She knew some of these. She hadn't known all of them together. Nobody had ever put them together before because I had never put them together before. $29,400, I said, over 10 years. I am not saying this to create a fight. I am saying it because when we talk about what I owe this family, I think we should know what this family and I currently owe each other. Marcus looked up from his hands. That's not. I'm not finished, I said, not sharply, just clearly. I set down the second section. This is the timeline of how this situation was presented to me, starting with a conversation I overheard through the kitchen window 2 weeks ago. I watched my mother's face. I came to bring you cornbread that Wednesday evening. The window was cracked. I heard you tell Marcus that you would have me cover the debt because I would not say no. The room went very quiet. Beverly said, Patricia. My mother's chin came up. I was trying to reassure him. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, I said, and I know you believe it. I have not said no for 10 years, Mama. You had every reason to believe this time would be the same. I set down the third section. The account you were planning to access has been moved. I moved it the night I overheard the conversation. It is in an account in my name only at a bank you have never used. The money Reginald and I saved for our house is where it has always been. It is just not where you can reach it. Marcus stood up. Cherise grabbed his arm. My mother said, Della, you can't just. It is my money, I said. It was always my money. I am the one who earned it. I am the one who saved it. I have the right to put it wherever I choose. But your brother needs. Mama, I said it gently. Let me finish. I set down the last section. I am not going to pay Marcus's debt. Not 48,000, not 4,800. Not because I don't love him. I do love him. But loving someone and covering every consequence of every decision they make are not the same thing. I know that now in a way I did not know it 10 years ago when I started this ledger. Marcus said, so that's it. You're just done. I looked at my brother, 39 years old, good at the things he was good at, genuinely kind when the pressure wasn't on. I felt the full love of him. I said, I am done being the answer to questions nobody asked me. Cherise started, you don't know what we're going through. You sit here with your husband and your house fund and you don't. I know exactly what you're going through, I said. I know the number to the dollar. It's on page 1. Cherise closed her mouth. My mother tried again, the last card she had. Your father, she said, would be devastated to see this family come apart over money. I held her eyes. My father, I said, would have fixed the problem himself before he let it land on me. That is what he did. He carried things quietly, and he never handed them to someone else and called it family. I know that because I watched him do it for 22 years. My mother looked away. Beverly was looking at the ledger. She had been reading it since I set it down. She had not said anything in a long time. She said, quietly, to no one in particular, $29,000. Just that, the number, said out loud by someone who had not already made their peace with it. It sat in the room for a long moment. Marcus was the first to leave. He stood up without speaking, took Cherise by the arm, and walked out of my house. The door did not slam, which surprised me. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe the ledger had taken something out of him that anger couldn't replace. Cherise paused in the doorway. She looked back at me. She did not apologize, but she looked at me in a way that was different from how she had looked at me when she arrived, and I understood that she was recalibrating something, though I did not know what. Then they were gone. Beverly stood. She came across the room and she squeezed my hand, once, and she said, I'll call you this week. She kissed my mother on the cheek. She left. That was just my mother and me. She sat in the chair by the window in her good coat, and she looked at the folder on the table. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at me. She said, I didn't know it was that much. I said, I know. She said, I wasn't thinking about your house. I wasn't thinking about what it had cost you. I said, I know that too. She said, I needed it to be okay. I needed Marcus to be okay, and you were the only one who could make it okay, and Her voice broke. She pressed her lips together. She did not cry, because my mother does not cry in ways that look like defeat. But the voice broke, and that was enough. I sat down across from her. The first time, I had sat down the whole afternoon. I said, Mama, I love you, but I cannot be the answer every time. Not because I am withholding love, because the answer needs to start somewhere closer to the problem. She looked at me. I said, Marcus needs a financial counselor. He needs to call the loan servicer himself and set up a payment plan and deal with the consequence of the debt on his own terms. Not because I want him to suffer, because I want him to still be standing in 10 years. She absorbed that. Then she said, and us. I said, we are fine. We are going to be fine. But things are going to be different. She nodded, slowly. I did not hug her when she left. I held the door, and she walked out, and I watched her get into her car and drive away. Reginald came out of the corner. He said nothing. He just came and stood next to me in the doorway. I said, that was the hardest thing I have ever done. He said, I know. I said, I would do it exactly the same way again. He said, I know that too. The collectors found Marcus. Of course they did. That was always going to happen whether I intervened or not. He lost the truck in November, which was the thing he had been most afraid of, and the loss of it turned out to be smaller than the fear of it, the way most feared things are. He called me in December, not to ask for money, to ask if I knew anything about negotiating with a debt servicer on a settlement. I knew a lot about it. I gave him the name of a non-profit credit counseling organization in Clarksville that I had worked with through my job. I told him to call them on a Tuesday because that was when the best counselor, a woman named Renee, had her intake appointments. He said, you're not going to help me yourself. I said, I am helping you. I am giving you the number. A pause. That's a different kind of help than what I'm used to from you. Yes, I said, it is. He went to see Renee. She negotiated a settlement plan for him. It was not painless, but it was his. He had made the calls. He had attended the meetings. He had done the paperwork. And when it was done, he had done it himself, which turned out to matter in a way I could not have given him by writing a check. My mother did not speak to me for 6 weeks. Then she called on a Sunday, which was our day, and said she had been thinking about the ledger. I said, okay. She said, I think I knew. Not the number, but I think I knew I was asking more than was right, and I kept doing it, because you kept saying yes. That was the closest my mother has ever come to an apology. I said, I know. She said, I'm sorry, Della. She said it clearly. No performance, no warmth strategy, just the words. I said, thank you, Mama. We talked for 40 minutes after that. About the weather and about Beverly and about the cousin who was getting married in the spring and about Marcus and Renee and the progress he was making. She asked about the house fund. I said it was intact. She said, good, that word in her voice, without any performance behind it. Just, good. Reginald and I made an offer on a house in March. A 3-bedroom Craftsman on the north side of Clarksville, with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that got morning light and a backyard with a fence already built. We closed in May. The week before closing, I printed a final version of the ledger, the one from October. I folded it once and put it in the back of my home filing cabinet, behind the tax returns, where it would stay as a record of what had happened and what it had cost, and what it had been worth not to give in. I also printed one more document, a blank one, a new page with new columns, date, amount, purpose, repaid, just the headers, nothing underneath, a clean ledger, not because I expected anything to be different overnight. Families are slow things, they change in the small degrees that are easy to miss until you look back from a distance and see how far you've traveled. But I had learned, in 9 days in October, that the record matters, that the column you keep is the truth when everyone else is arguing over feelings, and that the most powerful thing a woman who counts things can do is to start a new page. I keep the October folder in the filing cabinet. I keep it for the same reason I keep every piece of documentation, not because I intend to use it, because I know that the clean record is the only thing that can outlast the revised story. And my mother tells her story differently now. She does not say Della always comes through the way she used to. She says Della is very careful with her money. She says it with something in her voice I had not heard before October. Something that could almost be called respect. I will take it. I will take it and I will put it in the column where it belongs, carefully, with a date next to it, the way I put everything that matters. Here is what I know. You are allowed to love people and still keep your own books. You are allowed to have a record of what has been given and what has come back. You are allowed to look at the column on the right, with its long row of zeros, and decide that the word family has been used as a synonym for something it was never supposed to mean. And you are allowed, after years of saying yes, to say the single, short, complete word that the people who love you correctly will understand. No, not because you have stopped loving them, because you finally understand that the love worth keeping is the kind that doesn't need to reach into your account to prove itself. I said no in my living room on a Saturday in October, and I have been standing on solid ground ever since. That's my story. If you've ever been the one everyone relied on until you finally said enough, tell me where you're listening from in the comments below. Subscribe to Sweet Payback Stories for more stories where the truth finally gets counted.